There is a specific kind of man who meets a woman like this once in his life. He can feel it immediately. Something about her is different. She doesn't laugh at the things other people laugh at. She asks questions that make him stop and actually think. She looks at him like she already knows something about him that he hasn't said out loud yet. And instead of running toward her, he runs. He doesn't know why. He just knows that being around her makes him feel like every wall he has ever built is made of glass. What he doesn't understand is that he just walked away from the only woman who was ever going to love him at full volume. Today we are going to go somewhere most people are too uncomfortable to go. We are going to talk about what it actually does to a person, psychologically, emotionally, neurologically, to be in a relationship with a woman who feels everything. Not the surface version, the real version. The version that explains why so many men spend years after this relationship wondering what happened, why they couldn't make it work, and why every relationship after her feels like eating cardboard. If you have ever loved a woman like this, or if you are one, pay close attention. Because by the end of this, something is going to click that changes the way you understand love entirely. Let's start with something that nobody talks about. The human brain is a prediction machine. Every single second of your life, your brain is running simulations. It's asking, what comes next? What is this person going to do? How should I respond? And the reason this matters is because most of us spend our entire lives building relationships with people who are predictable. People whose reactions we can model, whose emotions we can forecast, whose behavior fits inside the patterns our brain has already learned. It's comfortable, it's safe, it's also completely hollow. And then she walks in. The woman who feels everything operates on a completely different system. Her nervous system is literally wired differently. Research into what psychologists call sensory processing sensitivity shows that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes emotional and sensory information at a significantly deeper level than everyone else. These are not people who are just dramatic or overly emotional. Their brains actually pick up more data. They notice subtleties in tone, in body language, in energy shifts that other people walk right past. What this means in a relationship is this. She is going to know things before you tell her. She is going to feel a shift in you before you even consciously register it yourself. And the moment you try to hide something, not even something serious, just a bad day you didn't want to talk about, she already felt it coming. She doesn't need your confession. She lived it alongside you in silence. For most men, this is the first point of fracture, and here's why. There's a concept in psychology called emotional concealment. It's the strategy most men are taught from childhood. You don't show pain. You don't advertise weakness. You perform stability even when you are disintegrating inside. This strategy works perfectly in most relationships because most partners don't have the perception to see through it. But with her, the strategy doesn't just fail, it backfires spectacularly. Because when she feels your concealed pain and you deny that anything is wrong, she doesn't just feel your original pain. She now also feels the distance you just created. She feels the lie. And she feels completely alone in a room with someone who is supposed to trust her. To her, emotional concealment isn't protection, it's abandonment. And here is where men make the most costly mistake of their lives. Instead of recognizing that her perception is a gift, instead of understanding that she is the first person in his entire life who is actually paying full attention, he labels it as suffocating. He calls it too much. He tells his friends she's intense. And he starts to engineer distance, not realizing that every inch of distance he creates is an inch closer to losing the most connected relationship he will ever have access to. Now let's talk about something that most relationship content completely ignores. There's a specific kind of honesty that lives inside women like this, and it is not the honesty of criticism. It is not the honesty of someone trying to point out your flaws to feel superior. It is something much more rare and much more threatening to the average ego. It is the honesty of someone who loves you too much to participate in the fiction you've built around yourself. Every single one of us carries a story, a carefully edited version of ourselves that we show the world. The story that explains our failures in ways that protect our pride. The story that frames our fears as choices. The story that makes us the reasonable one in every situation we describe. We tell this story so many times that we start to believe it ourselves. She doesn't believe it. Not because she's trying to expose you, not because she enjoys tearing things apart, but because she experiences you in a dimension that bypasses the story entirely. She feels the grief underneath the bravado. She senses the fear disguised as indifference. She knows the difference between someone who is genuinely okay and someone who has simply learned to perform okay with impressive precision. And when she gently, lovingly reflects this back to you, the average man doesn't feel grateful. He feels attacked. He feels naked. He feels like something has been taken from him. Because the armor he's been wearing for 20 or 30 years has just been seen through by someone who isn't even trying. That moment, that specific moment of being seen, is the fork in the road. The man who stays is the man who gets to experience something almost nobody gets to experience in their lifetime. The man who runs will spend the next decade in relationships that are comfortable and predictable and completely unsatisfying in a way he will never be able to fully articulate. Let's go deeper. One of the most misunderstood things about a woman like this is what people call her intensity. The word intensity gets thrown around like it's a warning label, like it's a problem to be managed. But intensity is not the issue. What intensity actually is in this context is the complete absence of the emotional armor that most people use to keep relationships at a safe, manageable distance. Think about what modern dating has become. It's a performance of strategic detachment. You don't text back too fast. You don't say what you feel too soon. You keep yourself slightly unavailable so that the other person never quite gets a secure grip on you. This is the game. And the game exists because everyone is terrified of being the one who wants it more. She doesn't play this game. Not because she can't, but because to her, the game is a form of slow emotional death. Every calculated pause, every withheld feeling, every performed indifference is a small act of self-betrayal that she is constitutionally incapable of committing. When she loves in full resolution. She's not going to pretend she didn't miss you. She's not going to act like the conversation you had last Tuesday didn't matter to her. She's not going to manufacture distance to protect her ego. She is going to show up completely, every single time. And for a man who has been playing the game so long that he has forgotten what real feels like, this is terrifying. Not because it's bad, because it's real. And real means vulnerable. And vulnerable means risk. And risk means she could see him, truly see him, and still decide he isn't enough. Which is the fear that lives underneath every relationship game ever invented. Here's what the research tells us about this. Studies on attachment theory consistently show that people with avoidant attachment styles, and many men are conditioned into exactly this pattern, are not actually comfortable with emotional distance. The distance is a defense mechanism. Underneath the need for space and independence is an incredibly strong desire for deep connection, paired with a deep belief that they are not safe enough or worthy enough to have it without destroying it. She walks in and offers exactly the deep connection they crave, and the avoidant attachment system immediately panics, because now it's real, now it's available. And that means there is actually something to lose. This is why so many men sabotage relationships with women like this, not because she was too much, but because he finally had something that was actually worth something and that felt more dangerous than anything he had ever let himself want. Stay with me, because this next part is the part people never hear. There is something she does that has no name in common relationship language, but it needs one. When she commits to you, she doesn't just commit to who you are right now. She commits to who she can see you becoming. She sees the best version of you so clearly and so consistently that it becomes almost uncomfortable to be around her when you are not living up to it. Not because she says anything, but because her belief in you is so visible and so steady that your own mediocrity becomes impossible to ignore in her presence. This is simultaneously one of the greatest gifts another human being can give you, and one of the most destabilizing experiences you will ever have in a relationship. Because most men have spent their lives in environments, families, friendships, past relationships, where their potential was either ignored or actively discouraged, where being good enough was the ceiling. And then this woman shows up, and the ceiling she sees for you is somewhere in the atmosphere. And the gap between where you are and where she sees you is both deeply motivating and deeply uncomfortable. Men who are ready for this respond by rising. They use her belief as fuel. They grow not for her, but alongside her. And they become genuinely better versions of themselves because of the mirror she holds up without ever forcing them to look in it. Men who are not ready respond by resenting her. They experience her belief as pressure. They interpret her vision of their potential as a judgment of their present, and they walk away, telling themselves she expected too much, never acknowledging that what she actually expected was just for them to try.
Now let's talk about the question nobody asks, but everyone should. Why does a woman like this stay so long in relationships that aren't working? Because she is not just experiencing the relationship as it is. She is simultaneously experiencing the relationship as it could be. She has an almost architectural ability to see the structural potential of a connection. The places where, with a little more patience, a little more communication, a little more honesty, everything could transform. And because she can see it so clearly, she keeps investing toward that version, even when every external signal is telling her that the other person has already checked out. This is where the psychological concept of intermittent reinforcement becomes dangerous for her. When someone gives you love inconsistently, moments of genuine warmth followed by cold withdrawal, your brain actually becomes more addicted to those moments of warmth than it would if the warmth was constant. The unpredictability triggers the same neurological reward circuits as a slot machine. The moments of connection become intensely meaningful, precisely because they are so rare and so unpredictable. For a woman who feels everything, those moments of real connection hit with extraordinary force. She holds on to them. She analyzes them. She uses them as evidence that what she believes is possible actually is possible. And this keeps her in situations far longer than her own well-being should allow. It is not weakness. It is not codependence. It is the tragic byproduct of a heart that was built for depth, trying to survive in a world that rewards surface. Here's something that might change the way you see this entirely. The reason being with a woman like this is so difficult for most men has almost nothing to do with her. It has to do with a very specific form of internal work that most men are never pushed to do until a relationship like this forces the issue. Emotional literacy. The ability to identify, name, understand, and communicate your inner experience with accuracy and honesty. Most men move through their emotional lives the way someone moves through a dark room they have lived in for years. They have a rough map. They know where the furniture is. They get from one side to the other without too much damage. But they have never turned the lights on. They have never actually looked at the room. She turns the lights on, and suddenly he can see every corner. Everything he has been tripping over and pretending wasn't there. Every piece of furniture he arranged to cover the walls he doesn't want to look at. And the instinct, the very powerful, very understandable instinct, is to find the switch and turn the lights back off as fast as possible. The men who don't reach for the switch are the ones who get to stay. They are the ones who stand in the lit room and say, out loud, "This is a mess. I didn't know how much of a mess this was, and I want to clean it up." Not for you. For me. Because I deserve to live in a room with the lights on. That decision, that single, terrifying, life-altering decision, is what makes a man worthy of a woman like this. Not perfection, not emotional mastery, just the willingness to stand in the light without immediately running for the dark. Let's talk about her guard, because this is the piece that destroys the most promising beginnings before they ever have a chance to become something real. When you first meet her, she might not seem like what you expected. You've heard that she's emotional, expressive, deeply connected. But when you sit across from her, she's measured. She's observant. She listens more than she speaks, and when she does speak, she chooses her words with a precision that feels almost deliberate. She smiles, but there's something behind the smile that you can't quite read. You might interpret this as disinterest. You might decide she's cold, or that the chemistry isn't there, or that whoever told you she was this incredibly feeling person had the wrong woman. What you are actually experiencing is a security protocol that took years of emotional damage to build. Because she does not bruise, she shatters. And she has shattered before. She knows exactly how long it takes to rebuild herself after the wrong person gets past her defenses. She knows the specific geometry of that kind of devastation. So she watches you. Not suspiciously, but carefully. She is asking questions she will never say out loud.
Does he do what he says he will do? Is he consistent when it's inconvenient? Does he handle her edges with steadiness, or does he flinch? Can she trust him with a small piece of herself before she risks anything larger? Most men fail this test not because they are bad men, but because they are impatient. They want the warmth before they've earned the warmth. They want the depth without building the foundation that depth requires. They interpret her careful approach as rejection and withdraw in self-protection, just as she is beginning to open a door they'll never know existed. The man who passes this test doesn't do anything spectacular. He just shows up, consistently. He says what he means. He follows through on small things when she's not watching. He doesn't perform interest, he is interested. And slowly, steadily, without fanfare, she begins to let the guard down. First an inch, then a foot. Then one morning he wakes up and realizes she has handed him something she has never handed to anyone. Her complete, undefended, extraordinary self. And from that moment on, nothing in his life will ever look the same. Because loving a woman who feels everything is not just a relationship, it is an education. It is the accelerated version of every personal growth journey you might have taken decades to stumble through on your own. It is having someone beside you who will not let you stay comfortable in your mediocrity, who will not pretend your pain isn't there, who will not participate in the small fictions that keep most people from ever becoming who they were actually meant to be. It will cost you your armor. It will cost you your carefully constructed story. It will cost you the comfortable distance you've kept between yourself and your own interior life. But what it gives you in return is something most people spend their entire lives chasing without ever finding. It gives you a relationship that is actually real, not performed, not negotiated, not strategically maintained. Real. And here is the thing about real love that nobody prepares you for. When you finally have it, when you are finally in the presence of someone who sees you completely and chooses you anyway, it doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like exhaling. It feels like setting down something heavy you didn't realize you'd been carrying. It feels like the first morning in a long time that you woke up and weren't performing for anyone. The woman who feels everything is not for every man. She is for the man who has run out of reasons to stay hidden. The man who is tired of relationships that are safe and shallow and ultimately empty. The man who is ready, finally, to be fully known. If you are that man, stop running toward comfortable. She is not the threat. She is the answer to a question you've been asking in silence your entire life. And if you are her, if you recognize your own story in everything said here, I want you to hear this clearly. Your depth is not a defect. Your intensity is not a flaw. Your refusal to love in half measures is not something that needs to be corrected or minimized or apologized for. It is the rarest, most valuable thing a person can bring into another person's life. The right person will not need you to turn yourself down. They will learn to turn themselves up. Wait for that person. Fight for that relationship. Trust that guard of yours, because it has kept your heart alive long enough to find what it was actually built for. The world needs people who feel deeply. It needs people who refuse to make peace with the shallow end. It needs people who hold up the mirror even when the person looking into it isn't ready to like what they see. Because those people, the ones who feel everything, they are not the problem in the story of modern love. They are the last remaining proof that love, real love, the kind that changes you at a cellular level, is still possible.